Very well. I think we can get started. We are. It is right now 7 o'clock Eastern time. So thank you again for everyone who is joining us. We're really pleased. We're really excited to have a lot of people really registering for this event. So right now we have a little bit over 80 participants that we certainly appreciate a lot, and we're very excited again to share the insights that we have discovered through the research that we have recently conducted with the support of the IKEA Foundation according to the green entrepreneurship research in both Kenya and India. So I'm gonna start by introducing myself really quick. My name is Fernando Almaguer. I am based in Mexico and I am a research analyst at ANDE. I'm gonna be your host today, and we are really happy to have a fantastic team from both guests. I guess starting with Patrick from IKEA Foundation, and I'm gonna slowly going to introduce the rest of the panelists throughout the call. And I want to go to the second slide of our presentation, just to let you know about the plan that we have for you today. The agenda here is that we're going to have a brief keynote speech from Patrick from IKEA Foundation. Then we're going to progress to share some of the research findings that we have had from both Kenya and India reports recently. For that purpose, we have local staff of ANDE in these two occasions. Then we're going to have a brief panel discussion with experts in the field, and we're going to finalize with some questions and answers time. So you can actually wait until that part, or if you already have some questions, something in particular that you would like to know, if you can start putting those questions in the Q&A section, it'll be fantastic. We can simply take note and we can read out loud those questions when the time is right. So I'm gonna going to the next. I want to introduce Patrick Obonio. He's a program manager at IKEA Foundation, and we're asking him to be here today simply because we are at the time that we embarked in this process of the research that we conducted, again both in India and Kenya as of green entrepreneurship. We had this the generous support of IKEA Foundation. So Patrick, we would like to welcome you to the call. I want to provide a very quick Patrick, I just want to just introduce you to the team, and would you like to please provide us some quick insight? I would say perhaps what we're more interested here is to understand kind of the reasons as of why IKEA Foundation is interested in green entrepreneurship both in India and Kenya, and the reasons as of why IKEA Foundation has been interested in this and funded the program.
Thank you so much, Fernando, for the kind introduction. And I know you said this is a keynote speech, but I wouldn't call it a keynote speech. I would just try to answer your question in very brief minutes, because you said I had a few minutes to speak. So again, I'm very delighted that we have almost 90 people signed up for this webinar, and I hope that this conversation today will be enriching for everybody who is attending this. Just to speak a little bit about where we are at the IKEA Foundation and why this is important for us. So at the foundation, we work to help families create a better life and protect the planet. And we are committed to actually tackling some of the root causes of inequality while simultaneously addressing the causes and effects of climate change. And so we believe that, families actually need both financial stability and a healthy environment if they and their children are to thrive. And what that means for us is that improving livelihoods has to go hand in hand with protecting the planet. Now, one of the ways in which we try to do this at the foundation is to be able to support green entrepreneurs that create meaningful jobs while protecting the planet, or create meaningful jobs with climate smart solutions. And we fund our partners to help nurture and grow scalable enterprises in the renewable energy, in the regenerative agriculture, in the waste and circularity sectors, so that they can help people and communities build meaningful livelihoods. And in addition to doing that, we also want to advance bold collaborations and scale proven solutions while influencing policy and practice towards creating a better world for the many people. So the really driver is to how can we create a better world for the many people, a world that improves people's livelihoods and protects the planet. And so in 2020, when we began the work on green entrepreneurship, we noticed that there was limited knowledge, evidence, and also limited voice of green entrepreneurs. And we therefore partnered with ANDE as one of the largest networks of enterprise support organizations to conduct this research that would do, let's say, two things. One is to really help build understanding and catalyze the green entrepreneurship ecosystem. And two is to provide insights that help stimulate a more effective and impactful support for green entrepreneurs. So those were really the key things that we wanted this research to do, to inform, provide new insights that would help people to support more green enterprises as we go ahead in these two countries. And in addition to that, we just don't want to get research that sits there on the table or that is shared. We have started working with ANDE to convene key stakeholders through their climate action labs in both India and Kenya. Because collectively, we believe that these stakeholders can develop solutions to some of these systemic challenges. And that is really at the core of our belief. We believe that complex challenges that we face today, such as climate change, such as poverty, or whatever you name it, can only be solved by coming together and helping getting stakeholders to bring their creativity and resources to the table. It cannot be solved by one foundation alone, or just the government, or one private sector. It means that we need to work together. And so while the research today that you're going to share highlights massive opportunities in a number of green economy subsectors, we also see that there are some challenges that each of us individually or collectively can help address to create a robust and impactful ecosystem. And we do want to hope that the findings of this research will actually inspire you, those who are participating today, to see opportunities for yourself, opportunities for your organizations, but more importantly, to explore collaborations that will advance an economy that protects the planet, but also creates meaningful economic opportunities for all. And as I end, I want to thank you for joining this webinar today, and I want to wish you a wonderful sharing. And my hope is that this is the beginning of many more dialogues towards creating a better and more prosperous world. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
That's great, Patrick. Thank you for the very thorough explanation. I think it's really inspiring. I want to note really quick that if there are any question, any comment that anybody would like to provide us, please again use the Q&A chat box, and we're going to be able to read it or to address it later on. So Patrick, thank you for that. I'm gonna continue with our presentation. I have already introduced myself, so I think we can go to the next one. And I want to briefly speak to you about the new research products that we have both for India and Kenya. I am portraying here the one that relates to India in particular. So then the title of this report, this is the full report that is called Building the Green Economy, Trends and Opportunities for Green Entrepreneurship in India. So we have both like an extended, like a full version of it. as well as an executive summary if you want to find or just to have like a quick glance on what the report is all about. And we also have a different product that is called Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Snapshot. If you're familiar with ANDE's work from a research perspective, you may be acquainted with the snapshot methodology, in which we are kind of trying to capture a very quick landscape into how the entrepreneurship environment looks like in a given place. This one, of course, has a particular outlook on green entrepreneurship. So there's like different ways on how we normally approach to the to different places or to different geographic locations. We have a dedicated website for this snapshot report, because this one doesn't only work as a report, let's say as a quick document, but it also has a dedicated website that it's an interactive website where you can actually go through most of the information that we have entered in there when it comes about the entrepreneurship support organizations. You can have all the detail, and there's a lot of like filterable interactive sections, so you can look for the information that so you can find the information that you're looking for. And that we're having that same logic for all the ecosystem snapshots that we have designed for the past couple of years. The URL of that report is India-ecosystem.tech. You can simply find it like that. But you should have also received the particular information where you can find the report, the full report of India, as well as the ecosystem snapshot. If that is not the case, we're obviously happy to share the URL back again with you, so you can access this information and distribute it with your contacts as much as you want. I want to go just to quickly speak about the Kenya report. It is the same type of research. We conducted the same type of research, but we want to emphasize the fact that these are not equally or exactly the same kind of report, in the sense that we found a different landscape in each country. So they're going to have like slight variances. There's slight differences that obviously is making the report and the results nuanced and differentiated between each other. So they have the same title: Building the Green Economy, Trends and Opportunities for Green Entrepreneurship in Kenya. In the same way, we have the full report, as well as an executive summary if you want to just have a quick glance on what the report contains. And the second piece of research is the Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Snapshot, that in the same way works in the exact same way as the one that I mentioned about India. It has a dedicated website. It's Kenya-ecosystem.tech. And again, we can share more detailed information about these reports later on. These are these four pieces of research that I just told you about. This is basically what is informing all these webinar. The insights that in a moment our local teams, our local chapters of India and Eastern Africa will be providing to you are actually coming from these research pieces. And we're gonna simply go a little bit more in depth into the contents and most of the interesting findings that we have had here. But since this is research, we want to go through in a methodological way. So I want to simply read out loud the research questions that guided this particular research. So the first one, and I would say this is the main research question: what are the characteristics of green entrepreneurship both in India and Kenya? And from that, we have secondary research questions that, in order to go more in depth on this. And the first one is: which sectors are most active, and which subsectors in there is there greatest opportunity for additional entrepreneurial activity? Then we also wanted to know how many entrepreneurship service providers are supporting green entrepreneurs in Kenya and India. What services do they provide? Where are they based? And where are the gaps in the support that they provide. And lastly, what are the key opportunities, challenges, and recommendations for how to build green entrepreneurship ecosystems in India and Kenya, based on insights from experts and stakeholders in each country? So again, these are the research questions that guided our research process. And going one step ahead, probably it's relevant to identify, since this is obviously coming from the particular perspective of green entrepreneurship, we wanted to first map or create like a proper mapping of what were the green sectors that we wanted to focus our attention here. So we are divided into 5 main sectors, and then we have different subsectors per each one of them. I'm going to simply, you can kind of look more in depth, where I'm simply going to identify the main green sectors here: low carbon energy, land management, transportation, water and waste management, and built environment. Obviously, we're going in a very thorough depth in each one of these sectors and subsectors in our report. And yeah, we simply invite you to take a deeper look into the report to get all the findings. But certainly, we are here to present you with the highlights. Moving on to the next section, I just wanted to bring to your attention really quick about methodology. What does that mean? How is it that we actually approach to realize these research projects? So we have 4 main data sources. The first one is entrepreneur data. What that means is that we had roughly 100 information from entrepreneurs, 100 from each country for both India and Kenya. This refers to green SGBs, green small and growing businesses, data pulled from publicly available sources. This is referring to Crunchbase, Accelerator, Incubator portfolios, and an IntelliCap database. IntelliCap is the particular research partner that we had locally both in India and Kenya. We had some intermediary data. We had 140 for India and 176 for Kenya. This is referring to survey data and desk research on entrepreneurial ecosystem actors. So we're referring to investors, accelerators, donors, research groups, etc. Then, and what this is probably the most valuable aspect of our findings of our actual research work is the market sizing. So we estimated market opportunity between 2022 and 2030 based on governmental or SGD targets for business segments in which small and growing business are active. And finally, we had stakeholder insights. So we are referring to actual interviews that we conducted, or our partner IntelliCap locally in both India and Kenya, and roundtables with entrepreneurs, investors, accelerators, etc., on perspectives regarding challenges and opportunities. Moving on, I want to first introduce Rosemary Amondi. She is our Regional Director of East Africa in ANDE, and we are really excited to hear Rosemary. She's going to present us with some of the insights specifically for the Kenya reports. So I'm gonna give it to you, Rosemary, if you want to start.
Thank you so much, Fernando. And just to echo Fernando and also Patrick as well, I'd like to thank everybody, each and everyone who's been able to join us on the call today. So I'd like to go straight into the highlights of the research findings from Kenya. So as Fernando kind of just set the background for us, one of the things that we were looking at were the key characteristics of the green entrepreneurship ecosystem in Kenya and in India. So for Kenya, some of the highlights that came up, particularly from the entrepreneur data that Fernando was referring to earlier, was that a lot of the businesses that seem to be getting traction have certain characteristics. So they have access to some funding sources. Many rely on grant funding. There are other sources of funding as well, including debt, equity, family, and friends. They have access to technical support. This could be either through accelerator program, training programs, fellowships, mentorship programs. They also have access to networking opportunities where they're able to either get into opportunities where they're able to get business deals, forge new partnerships, exposure, and generally just speaking to the power of networks in terms of furthering opportunities for the entrepreneurs. They also have innovative products, services, and technology. So those are some of just the key, what you'd call characteristics of some of these green, small and growing businesses. So on the overall, we found that a lot of these businesses were based in Nairobi. So there's a disproportionate concentration of green businesses in Nairobi. So that could be for a number of reasons, but over 80% of the green businesses that we looked at in the study are based in Nairobi. So that could point to, obviously, the need to expand both financial and non-financial services to the other underserved areas. So that's a key finding coming out of the study. So next, I would go into kind of the market opportunity and the support that is available by sector in Kenya. So as Fernando had highlighted earlier, I won't go into the specific subsectors, but what I want to highlight here is that we were looking at support from I would say four different lenses. So first of all, the availability of funding. We were looking at policy support, and we were also looking at accelerator, incubator support, and kind of putting that next to the market opportunity. So generally speaking, in terms of high, medium, or low, both in terms of the market opportunity, funding support, policy support, and the accelerator or incubator support. So by and large, the market opportunity, what we were calling the market sizing, across the 9 sectors that Fernando had spoken to earlier, for the period 2022-2030, is estimated to be $123 billion US. Now, the $123 billion US is cumulative across the 9 sectors. So just to highlight the sectors with the most support, sustainable agriculture and aquaculture, with a market size of $33 billion US. Renewable energy, $873 million US. And then sectors which require the most support, or other sectors which do not have as much support, were identified to be waste management and circular economy. So the interesting thing with waste management and circular economy here is, on one hand, it came out as having quite a sizable market opportunity, but when you looked at the level of support, whether it's in terms of funding support, policy support, acceleration, or capacity development programs, it was not commensurate to the size of the opportunity. So the key I think big takeaway from here is the big opportunity in waste management and circular economy at 54 billion US dollars, and water management at 22 billion US dollars. So the report will provide, quite some in-depth analysis in terms of the opportunities, both broadly in the sector, but also in the individual subsectors. So lastly, maybe just to mention one thing is in terms of, when you look at the market opportunity, for example, in the low carbon, you'd find in some areas. So for example, in renewable energy, you have a small market opportunity, but then you have high funding support and you have high policy support and you have medium acceleration or technical, what I would call technical assistance. And then on the other hand, you pick something like built economy or water and waste, you have a large market opportunity, but on the other hand, you have medium to low funding and policy support. So those are some of the highlights that we're seeing there, just in terms of the market size vis-a-vis the support and the opportunity there. The next area that I would like to quickly go through is the support available for green entrepreneurship. And here we were looking at both financial and non-financial support. So 94% provide non-financial support and 52% financial support. Obviously, there's actors and players who are providing both financial and non-financial support. So key thing there is most of the support is coming through in terms of non-financial support, with capacity development providers leading there. When you look at the ecosystem snapshot data, as well as the report findings as well, followed by investors, research or advisory service providers, DFIs, government agencies, and so on. So the most common types of support organizations are capacity development providers. And roughly 50% of support organizations are headquartered outside of Kenya. So that is to say that, of course, there are local organizations that provide support, both financial and non-financial support. But when you look at the numbers, it's more or less 50% of the organizations are more or less domiciled outside the country, but with presence in the country. So that's the data on the support that's available. Next, I'm going to touch on still sticking with the support and looking at the financial side of things. So 34% of the financial support that is received has come through in the form of grants. This is the most common type of funding, followed by debt at 22% and equity at 21%. Most common ticket size is anything up to 25,000 US dollars. Over 50% of financial support available directly support entrepreneurs. And the reason we're making this distinction is that financial support is not just direct to entrepreneurs. We've got financial support to investment funds, going to investment funds at 22%. We've also got funding that goes to intermediaries. We've seen the big role that intermediaries play in the support of developing the entrepreneurship ecosystem. And then we've also got a host of crowdfunding platforms that are receiving financial support as well. So that financial support is distributed in the ecosystem like I said, with the key finding that around 53% of that money is going directly to entrepreneurs. On non-financial support, which is in the form of research, technical assistance, and events. Majority of this funding is going into research on the sector. Typical what we've produced and we're sharing with you here today. Technical assistance, events, accelerator programs, co-working spaces, and fellowship. So these are the typical, non-financial support that is going towards green entrepreneurs in Kenya. Of course, with research leading. Recommendations and areas of collaboration in Kenya. So I think three highlights to kind of mention, but more generally, I think the areas that came out, of course, top, and we see this again and again, not just in the green entrepreneurship space, but also more early stage financing, growth oriented, whether it's early stage growth oriented, access to finance and capital is right there at the top as the key key area that needs to be addressed. Supportive policy environment. And in the report, you will read through. So this of course, within the renewable sector, the policy issues would be different, for example, from the waste sector. So I would encourage you all to look at that, because some of those policy, what I would call policy stumbling blocks, would be able to, in some ways, also unlock the barriers around financial access and also access to markets. So we also have the number of effective green businesses, and I think this relates to this conclusion around the limited number of investment-ready business models, access to climate tech, number of green accelerator programs or accelerator, environmental awareness. So there's this key issue around people are just not aware. Whether you're talking about, investors, you're talking about entrepreneurs themselves, some of the entrepreneurs also just don't know that they are green entrepreneurs. So there's a lack of awareness all around within the ecosystem, and then representation of minority and others. So on the overall, the three, to summarize, the three key, issues or areas or recommendations with regard to the challenges is the limited number of investment-ready business models. So it isn't that there aren't, green business models, but how ready are the businesses for investments, for financing, and in other words, ready to scale. So low investor confidence, I've mentioned this in green business models. I think this also touches just back to we're not seeing, we just haven't gotten to the point where we have many models coming out, back to the issue of awareness, also related to the issue of finance. So it's one of those circular problems. So limited financing toward adaptation and resilience. This is a point that is coming out in other, generally in obviously all these sectors, but more generally, I think in terms of climate, we've a lot of other reports also have pointed out that there is generally just more funding around mitigation than adaptation and resilience. And here too, our finding is not different. And in particular, private financing. So I will stop here and kick it back to Fernando. And in fact, I could actually just go ahead and introduce my colleague, Cypriya Sala, who's our program associate, and she is going to take us through the India findings. Thank you. Welcome, Cypriya.
Perfect. Thanks. Thanks, Rosemary. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today. So I will move into sort of highlighting some of the key insights that we drew from the India research. I think some of it you'll see is similar to what we observed in Kenya, but there are certain differences that we're seeing in this economy as well. So moving into the key characteristics of green entrepreneurship, as you can see, even with reference to what Rosemary mentioned, most green small and growing businesses have opened up in the past decade, and there was a clear uptick in 2015 and later, right? So I think when that conversation around the need to sort of tackle the climate crisis really accelerated, we also saw that translating into a growth of innovations in SGBs trying to solve for that crisis. In terms of a regional spread, we observed that there was somewhat similar, presence of SGBs across the south, the west, and the north, relatively lesser, 7% in central. And I think as we've been seeing, or we've been discussing this in terms of how the northeast part of the country requires that additional support, we're also seeing it in terms of the presence of SGBs, right? That there are enterprises that might not qualify the definition of SGBs. So even though we're seeing entrepreneurial activity, that region does need a lot of support to sort of help grow these businesses to that particular level. In terms of the case studies that we've highlighted in the reports mentioned, we've tracked multiple pathways for growth. I think we're seeing varied sources of funding, and I think we'll have our panelists address this a bit in the later part of today's webinar as well. We're seeing the networking and innovative sort of products, technologies are observed in some SGBs, not necessarily in all that we've highlighted. But the one common theme is just sort of leveraging marketing, advertising, and customer service, right? Being able to tap into the large market that India presents, which I will also walk you through in the next slide. Thanks, Fernando. So as you can imagine, with a country the size of India, the market opportunity across the 9 sectors cumulatively that we're looking at is well over 3,400 billion, right? So that's a significant potential that is ready to be tapped into. And similar to Kenya as well, the sectors that are seeing the most support, and this is support across different pillars, as you can see on that image, right? We're talking about funding, we're talking about policy, we're talking about accelerator, the incubator, sort of that capacity building ecosystem support, and the market opportunity that exists. So the sectors that we're seeing the most support is in sustainable agriculture and aquaculture. There are multiple government schemes that we can point towards, both at the national and the state levels, that are helping entrepreneurs in this particular subsectors, and of course, renewable energy, right? I think there's been a significant uptick in that conversation as well since we renewed commitments. But I think what I would want to draw attention to is the sectors that require the most support, where we also have observed the most in terms of market potential opportunity available, which is waste management and circular economy. We're looking at close to $800 billion in terms of market opportunity available in the country there. And that's particularly a sector where we're seeing policy support as well. We are seeing capacity development support come in, but significantly more that needs to be unlocked. So moving into the support available for green entrepreneurs in India, when we're talking about overall, we observed that we actually had about 78% of the support that's being provided fall into the financial bucket, right? And which is very interesting because I think a challenge that keeps coming up is cited in conversations that we've had with stakeholders is that there is a lack of finance for green entrepreneurs in this space. So just trying to kind of tally those two observations, I think there were some interesting insights that came out of that for us. Roughly 70% of the support organizations are headquartered in India, which is different, I think, to what we observed in Kenya, which also speaks to how a lot of these are being context driven, which is very, very important when we're talking about a topic that's climate change, right? Where it's going to vary based on the region that you're operating in as well. And the most common types of support organizations we observed were investors. In terms of the financial support, if we just move into a little more detail, equity was the most common type of funding that's available to entrepreneurs in this space. We had about 53% of that observed, followed by debt and then grants. The most common ticket size that we're observing in this ecosystem is between 100,000 to 500,000 USD. So falling into that definition of capital that's required for SGBs to be growing. About 2/3 of the financial support available are going directly towards supporting entrepreneurs. Looking at the non-financial support, I think a majority of that we observed was in the form of hosting events, which could mean hosting small-scale events, larger conferences. We see a lot happening in the EV space and electric mobility space in terms of having these larger discussions with policymakers and other related stakeholders. We also saw support available in the form of conducting research on the sector, providing technical assistance, but I think lesser, 21% compared to 44% in terms of running accelerator programs, which again comes up in multiple conversations that there is a specific kind of support required to even grow entrepreneurs from an idea stage to the next stage to be able to help them scale as well. So very quickly moving through the recommendations so that I can hand it over to our very capable panelists to really make sense of these numbers, because these numbers you can engage with, on the report and the links mentioned as well. The recommendations that came out in terms of areas of collaboration for green entrepreneurs in India, I think just sort of making sense of that, what I said earlier, right? Even though we have a significant number of investors in this space, what the investors feel are a limited number of investment-ready business models. So a lack of a pipeline from their perspective to be able to drive more capital into this space, limited familiarity with what is a successful business model, which I think some of the case studies highlighted could help shed some light on. And I think, as I've been mentioning, that mismatch between that supply and demand for capital, right? Do entrepreneurs really know what kind of capital that they're looking for is appropriate for them at their stages? And do investors have all the knowledge and the awareness to be able to drive funding towards the most impactful areas accordingly as well? I think these are some of the pieces that we'd be also keen to understand and explore further. So if any of this piques your interest, please reach out to the India chapter and we'd be happy to discuss this further and see how we can maybe build more effective programming. But I know we're over time, so I'm going to hand this back to Fernando to then go through, take it over with the panelists.
That is great, Cypriya. Thank you so much. Thank you both, Cypriya and Rosemary, for presenting those findings. Where we're seeing that they have already arised a few questions that we are already addressing as much as possible through the Q&A box so far. So again, thank you for that, and we're going to move forward to another section in our program today. I am happy to introduce you to two leading experts in the field. So here we go. The panel discussion, we're going to have actually three panelists. We are actually being joined by one more that I'll introduce in a minute, but I want to quickly introduce Eveline Jansen, Regional Program Manager at Enviu. So as a Regional Program Manager for Enviu's Food Flow Program, Eveline works on revolutionizing the East African food system. Enviu is an impact-focused in-house venture building studio. Enviu's efforts in India are on themes of preventing post-harvest loss and regenerative agriculture. Eveline supports the team of venture builders by providing strategic thinking, forging the right partnerships, planning for a sustainable way forward, and proudly showcasing Food Flow's work. She's always on the outlook for where to go next and what Enviu's new projects will be. Welcome, Eveline. And I want to also introduce Vidhya Soundararajan. She is the Director of Ecological Footprint at WWF in India. And Vidhya Soundararajan has more than 2 decades of experience in the fields of sustainable development, climate change, public policy, development fund management, and large-scale adaptation programs. She's presently the Director of Ecological Footprint at WWF-India. Prior to this, she has worked with Oxford Policy Management as Head of Programs and Senior Regional Advisor for Climate Change and Energy of the British High Commission. So welcome to the both of you, and thank you for joining us. And last but not least, I would like to introduce Starlene Sharma. She is the co-founder of Green Artha that for the in a very last minute, we had the opportunity to have her here to join us. So thank you very much for joining us today, Starlene. I want to move forward. We have a couple of questions. The idea in today's panel discussion is that at the time that we have been presented with this information from our Kenya and India teams about the particular reports that we have developed in these 2 countries, with these findings, kind of the overall question is, how do we move forward with these? What are the next steps, or what can we actually do? So we have a couple of questions that I would like to ask. I'm going to start with you, Vidhya. And the first question is,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Vidhya, unsurprisingly, limited access to finance has been identified in our research as a prominent challenge for green entrepreneurship in both Kenya and India. One of the leading factors of this is that investors seem to be unfamiliar with green business models and are therefore hesitant to invest in them. In your opinion, what are other important inhibiting factors, and what can be done about it?
Okay, thanks. And thank you, Rosemary and others, for such insightful presentations. Some of those graphs and figures are really, really clearly spell out the problems. On the finance, one of the things that I want to highlight from the question itself is it's not the investment for small green businesses that itself is a problem. So the money is available. It's the intent, the assurance, the trust that green businesses will continue to do and bring investment and profit. That kind of instilling that kind of confidence in the investor is sort of more the fundamental issue. And the reason for that, which came out very evidently when we were going through the ANDE-led design process over the last couple of years, it's multi-pronged. It's also the fact that the business, the landscape, the ecosystem itself is so volatile, so evolving every day and fairly nascent, that the understanding of how a certain product will play out in the market is completely lacking. It's probably lacking even for people like us who work on the ecosystem development for clean tech businesses. So investors are sort of further moved away. The other thing is there is also sort of lack of understanding plus clarity or confidence from among the small green businesses to be able to reach out and seek for these sort of funds from all of these investors available. So there is this disconnect between the available products and the investors or buyers and the sellers, which is one of the very, very big gaping Other issue which potentially mitigation as such as a space broadly initially, or I should say renewable energy as a space, which it faced in the initial sort of a decade or so, was that the market was taking its time to understand and to pick up. And once the market picked up, there more investment started coming in. However, what's happening in the case now is that the turnaround time has become so fast in terms of the need for these technologies is ever increasing. So that there seems to be a greater number of hindrances in the market as such, picking it up and running with it. That's the other very big problem in terms of small green businesses being able to access the money that's available. There are huge amounts of committed money that are linked to either a carbon target or a water target or a plastic circular economy target, environment target, and which could very well be the source of investment for green businesses. However, between the product of the green businesses and the targets, which are either around carbon impact targets, again, there is a missing link. So that's also one of the key features which acts up when it comes to investments. I think I'll stop now. That's quite a few. I mean, of course, there are many more, but potentially these 3 or 4, if we can address collectively in the next couple of years, this space should see a boom.
No, that is excellent, Vidhya. Thank you very much for that. Again, I'm going to read another question that in this case we have for Eveline. If there are any other panelists who would like to interject or to provide some feedback on what has been said, please feel free to do so. I'm going to go to our next question, and this is ANDE's research suggests that while policies to support private enterprises in green sectors exist, most of them actually do not provide tailored support for small and growing businesses or SMEs, small and medium enterprises. However, these challenges the challenges that SGBs face are different from those of large corporations, of course. So, Eveline, can you speak about strategies or initiatives that can help SGBs to close this gap?
Thanks, Fernando, and also thank you to ANDE for compiling this research work. Actually, Fernando, I also kind of want to have a quick addition to the previous question, which is way more the area that Enviu operates in, and then I'll try to answer the policy question. I think on the getting investors to invest in green business models, part is of course also what Vidhya said. It's perception, it's risk perception. There's a lot of work to be done to inform investors also better on how the workings of of business models of green enterprises in the global south, how that's different, and especially the ones that are outside of the usual pool of investors, right? So I think we need to also make sure that the business model and the opportunity becomes more known. And then of course I do agree that business models, they need to be built for commercial scaling and or at least to be profitable, and it should be really, it's something that we do at Enviu when we're thinking through what we want to build in terms of venture and business model. It's part of the focus from moment one. It can't really be an afterthought. Like, you can't think first we get the impact right and then we'll figure out the numbers, because that's really, really difficult. But then even if you're gonna be developing your business sustainably, then still I think also investors should be more aware that there's many green enterprises that serve a customer base. They're not like flush with cash. They're often hard to physically reach. Sometimes it just takes much more longer time to become profitable, because you really need to reach scale. And so having that capital, like having to be more patient, and also an acceptance that you won't have like Silicon Valley like returns, yeah, that's pieces of information that need to be pushed to investors. And then at the same time, I think Enviu has a unique role where we build our companies towards being investment ready. The fact that we do it through like a solid methodology, we have like a whole structure behind it, creates more confidence because we also have a track record of more success. And so, by doing so, we're really able to support the venture on the growth journey and attracting and enabling funders and investors to step in. Also, as Vidhya said as Cypria actually mentioned, at the moment that's appropriate, so that they get the right capital at the right times. And so maybe what's also needed, and not trying to be super controversial here, is some innovation in the entrepreneur support ecosystem. Are there new ways in which we can do something? And I also saw a question flying by where someone said like we should be more proactive with doing something with the findings now. So I'm wholeheartedly agreeing there. On the policy, I'll be super brief. Like I don't have a strong knowledge, deep advocacy knowledge, but Rosemary already said like, okay, we're all in different in kind of like different sectors. So every sector will have specific needs. And there's so many questions that this actually raises. Like, is it a policy problem, or is it like an implementation problem? Is it at the legislative area? Is it at the regulation side? It's very multifaceted. But I think, assessing the environment, identifying priority intervention areas, and then making sure that, there's aligning between policy initiatives and legal regulations, I think would be key. And then is there someone that's like, being a lobbyist of sorts that does this on our behalf, or is there like a body that does this? Yeah, I think that would be what I'd like to say on that.
Thanks,
Eveline.
Eveline. Sorry, Fernanda, if I may just jump in briefly. I do want to invite in Starleen for this particular question, because I know Starleen in her current role at Green Artha as the co-founder and managing partner, but also in her previous avatar where she was the founding CEO of India's first dedicated clean tech incubator at AIC Sangam, right? I think really want to hear from you in terms of both the access to finance piece, what you're seeing as inhibiting factors, quote unquote, and also just in terms of that conducive environment, because I think for the past decade you've tracked that growth in the India ecosystem at least. So just curious to hear your 2 cents on this, Starleen.
Thank you, Cypria, and thank you everyone for being here. The one factor I would say is like we have to look at this also from the investor perspective, which is fundamentally investors know what their job is, which is that they have to deploy capital and they have to return capital to their investors. And so fundamentally, as an investor, our job is to look at and understand and value risk. And what we see a lot of times in the climate innovation space is that there's a mismatch between what entrepreneurs and sometimes entrepreneur support organizations think of as commercial readiness or even technology readiness, and what commercial buyers of those products might see as business model readiness, commercial readiness, and so forth. Which means that there's a mismatch both in terms of what capital is being sought, as well as a mismatch in terms of when that capital is ready to be deployed. And I mean, fundamentally, there are some differences in the market between what we're seeing in Kenya and Africa versus what we're seeing in India, where there is much more capital becoming available. But what we do see fundamentally in India is that there is actually a lot of capital becoming available in the market, but there's still a lot of startups that are not being able to access that capital. And there's still a lot of investors saying, but where is the talent? And part of that is because, yes, there is a lot of startups that are working in hardware spaces that have differentiated business models. They're selling into markets where there's an average of 2 months cash on hand by the buying customers. And that fundamentally means that we need to be looking at things differently. Or they're selling materials or chemicals or otherwise, which have very long product development cycles. And we're not necessarily understanding that when we're looking at it from the side of what do we need to do to get entrepreneurs to the market. But when we're looking at it from the side of investors, we're saying like this chemical, to get this into the market is going to take a 5-year period. right? So what do we do between now and then to like bridge that gap? Or this business model is going to require fundamental proofs of concept that it can work before we can deploy debt, which is not ready to take risk, right? Debt does not take technology risk. It does not take business model risk. And so if we have to prove that, how do we do it? And venture capital, the traditional venture capital that we're looking at that has been practiced in Silicon Valley in the last 20 years and that has been happening in India in the last 20 years is not the right thing. There's fundamental shifts in how we need to look at and value risk that really fundamentally can be done, right? But instead of saying we want one company that's going to be the winner take all, we have to say we need 20 companies to do this. And to meet the requirements of getting to a 1.5 or 2 degree of warming by 2050 or net zero by 2050, there are fundamental shifts in this idea of winner take all that needs to happen. There are fundamental shifts in terms of how we look at and value risk. And fundamentally, when that happens, there are investors that know how to come in. They're just not the traditional venture capital investors that have been operating in the venture capital space that are the right investors. But I can say, and I can say this from having said similar comments maybe to some of the ones that have been shared in the report or otherwise, if you go tell investors that you need to show them how to do their job better, you're going to get the most anathemic response you've ever experienced, and they're not going to show up at the table next time. Right. But if you say, like, I have something really cool to show you, and I'm going to show you how you can make a lot of money doing this too, then they're ready to have a conversation. And sometimes that's exactly what is needed. The other thing, and I'll pull this just as sort of like an insight from very early on when I was working in India, is that there are some language differences, right? Like you get an entrepreneur in front of a guy who's trying to like provide debt, and the entrepreneur says, I'm going to save the world. And the debt guy is just like, when am I going to get paid back? Like, save the world, by all means, go do. But like, when am I getting paid back? And so there's a bridging on the language that we have to build into the support organizations if we want entrepreneurs to be successful. And the language we use for venture capital is the language we use for private equity, which is perhaps a little closer to what we need. The language we use when we're talking with people who are providing debt, that's all very different. And we need to think of investors, I think, very much as our friends and bring them on this journey with us, not look at them as the other that needs to be told to get their act in order. So I'll hand back to everybody else. I don't want to take up too much time, but that would be kind of my thoughts on this topic.
No, that is great, Starlene. And on that very insightful note, we're going to have to wrap up our webinar. Unfortunately, we run out of time. The truth is, we do have very valuable information, a lot of really valuable information to share in just an hour. And I want to one more time say thank you to our panelists, to Eveline, Starlene, and Vidhya. Thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your knowledge with us as much as we could. Even though it was short, I believe it was really insightful and helpful for the audience. There's a couple of more questions that we're going to take note now from the public that we are going to be unable to address right now, but we can simply take it offline and share it with the people who asked these particular questions. And I think that'll do it for today. I want to say thank you one more time for everyone and for all the attendees around the world that are joining us. And thank you again. I'll see you very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, thanks, everyone. Bye.
Goodbye.